Okay, we're live. My name is Attorney Vincent Davis, and this is The Secret, How to Fight CPS and Win. I'm joined by my two special co-hosts this evening, Ms. Deidre Payne. Ms. Payne, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
And also we have Mr. Darren Guai from the great state of Maine. Darren, how are you?
We're good, Mr. Davis. Thanks for asking.
All right. How are things in that studio this evening?
Ooh, they were a little bit stressful there for a second. I'm not going to lie. That last 2 minutes can definitely make my nerves pop. So I can't imagine what you must feel like in a courtroom. Like, especially when nothing's working, your client's not in there on time. You're probably standing around looking, your notebook fell on the floor,
Right.
Like, that's how I just felt. And then, I didn't even know where this noise was coming from that you guys were hearing. I have green lights all over me. Our heads are falling off. That's just crazy. Anyway, other than that, I'm doing good. We're doing great.
Okay, good. And Deidre, you're of course here in California, right?
Orange County, yes.
Orange County, yeah. Okay. I see we have a special guest tonight, Miss Tiffany. Is it Jinx?
Yes, yes, it is. Jinx.
Jinx. Okay. So Tiffany, I see you're from South Carolina.
I am.
So
very good old boy state. Good old boy state here in South Carolina a couple hundred years back, it feels like.
Are you from South Carolina originally?
I am. Yes, I am.
How far is South Carolina from Maine?
Oh, good. 3,000 miles?
No, it's only 800.
800? Okay, it feels like 3,000. That's a long way up. I guess you're through.
So that's where I'm from.
Oh, really? South. Yeah, I'm about, but let's say about an hour and a half away from there. Yeah.
I think it's only like 856 miles.
Good job. That's great. I'm glad somebody knows.
Darren, you're originally from the South?
Yes, sir.
What state?
South Carolina.
Oh, really? What city did you grow up in?
I didn't. I actually grew up in Nebraska, in Bellevue, Nebraska. We left Myrtle Beach, I don't know, at a young age, 3 or 4 or something along those lines. Went to Nebraska. From Nebraska, came up to here, and that's how we got let off here for my dad's retirement. So,
okay. Deidre, are you from Orange County, Southern California originally?
Yes, but believe it or not, I've been to Goose Creek, South Carolina one time to visit my sister when she was in the Navy. But other than that, I've never ventured out that way.
Now that's
I drove her from there all the way back to California, and oh my gosh, in that great state of Texas, did I get the speeding ticket? Of course, but that was a mighty long drive.
Yeah, that's 15 minutes away from me. Yeah.
It was definitely a big change of where I'm from, Orange County. So
absolutely
nice to see differences, though.
So Tiffany,
you had to pay for your speeding tickets right when they pulled you over. You didn't have the cash in your pocket. You were going to jail, man.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, the sheriff with his cowboy hat, his boots on, and there he was. Meaning the state just feels like it never ends. That's why. And so my sister even told me, don't get a ticket in Texas. And she fell asleep. And next thing you know, I'm getting pulled over. And she goes, what did I tell you? So go figure. I just wanted to get home by that point.
Texas.
So Tiffany,
actually, I was born in Texas, but I never lived there.
Tiffany, what's going on with CPS in South Carolina these days?
Well, I have found it to be slightly on the collusive side, and during this particular one that I had recently. Well, not recently. Well, it's been a few years. It did get closed, so I was fortunate for that. But I had to fight pretty hard and hire a lawyer. That I found out I could have hired for my public defender for $40. It would have been the same person, and he didn't help me get my children home any faster. They were removed for 5 months. I had a visit, an in-office visit. It was supposed to be the last before they closed the case. My son had gone to school and had a black eye. And I even went in and told his teacher what happened. And my daughter had hit him with a glow on stick, and gave him a little black eye. So, but when the teacher asked him about it again, he said that his daddy was angry at him. So because of what he said, I learned what mandatory reporting was. So DSS came out to the house, and like I said, we were right. We came in the office to have our last visit to close the case out, because it was what it was. It was an accident. And they leave me waiting in the office for probably over an hour and a half, and my kids weren't sitting any longer. They were bouncing around and just getting a little just a little aggravated from trying to keep them to sit still. They didn't want to. So I sat my daughter in my lap, and somehow my daughter headbutts me in the mouth. So we get up to go to the bathroom because I'm bleeding from my lip. Well, I noticed I don't even close the bathroom door all the way. I just wet a paper towel, and I notice on her, she has a little red mark from my teeth, and here I am with this blood in my mouth. And but I noticed that the regional supervisor standing outside the door. So I open up the door to see what it is that's going on. It's our turn, I'm hoping. And she is moving my kids along from me, and she's telling me to sit in the waiting area again. Well, this is wonderful, because I'm like, I'm really shocked because I really don't understand what's going on at this point. Well, about an hour later is when they bring me back to tell me that my daughter has told them that in that bathroom I had pinched her in her face, and that they were removing my children. I went into the greatest panic attack of my life, because what else do you do? Especially when you can't believe. As I told this regional supervisor that there was no way that's what my daughter said, because that's not what happened. And my daughter at this point she was 4 years old. She was in 4K. And so there was no reason for her to say anything different. And I proceeded to have my children actually taken from me on something that I found out later on was a custody visitation agreement. I had read an article that in Cherokee, North Carolina, that there was a DSS office that had gotten in trouble for using those to remove children. Well, that's exactly what they removed my kids on. And for the next 5 months, I proceeded to have to fight, jump through every hoop they wanted me to, for whatever reason it was. They wanted me, to do this, to get my kids back. And it was the most, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't, because they wanted me to go through drug classes. There was no reason for that. There was no suspicion of drugs. They wanted me to have a psychological evaluation, because I was having a panic attack when they took my children away. I don't know who wouldn't. Especially with one of my children was to say, well, he has autism. So I knew right then and there, that no one in the world was going to care for my children or understand my children the way I did. So to have them removed, I've never had them removed from my home. I've raised 7 children, and these are my last 3, my smaller children. So I've been a mother for, since I was 17 years old. So to me, having, especially in the county that I was in, I was pretty well known because my father was an attorney, or father-in-law, excuse me, and I helped him in the court a lot. So these people knew who I was, but they acted like I was abusive. I was an abusive mother to my children, and that they had all right to do what they were doing. And if they did not, like the word imminent danger, well, that my children were in imminent danger. That to me, that shattered me into 1,000 pieces. Especially, I care for the elderly. I mean, I love children. Kids love me. I don't think there's a mean bone in my body, but I had someone telling me there was. And so, yeah. And I found out, like I said, hiring and paying $7,000 for an attorney that I could have gotten as a public defender, who helped them keep my children for as long as they did. I had everything they wanted me to do completed within 2.5 months, and they still weren't returned. We went to court several times for no reason, because nothing was done in that particular hearing. So I don't really know exactly what it was that they attempted to do, but my kids are traumatized, and my family has never been the same. I had to divorce my husband, because they were going to use him, is why they weren't going to give me back my children. His anger issues, that he had to do 42 weeks of domestic violence as the batterer, because based off of an allegation that I had 4 years prior to, that I guess was still on their end, that they could see, even though it was unfounded, but they had him do that. So instead of having my husband of 12 years, father of my children, be the reason why I didn't receive my children back, I divorced him. And so that's where we are, a broken family that has had, if DSS was, or that's what we call them here, was necessary, I should not have the lasting effects that I have in my family from them removing my children.
Do you have your children in your custody now?
I do. I got him back 5 months. 5 months later, I had them even try to, I had to get an apartment. So I did. Of course, I was a housewife. My husband worked, but I went out and I had a job, because I knew that they were going to pull that one last, minute, because they hadn't said anything about it, about me having to leave my husband or anything like that. This was something I did to ensure, when I saw how they were behaving themselves towards my husband, which was unwarranted. It really was. It really was. I fully believe that the woman that had 2 of my children, if she didn't try to have her, she tried to feel me out and find out who the kind of person I was. And I truly believe that if she would have disagreed with me, she would have tried to adopt my children. She has 10 adoptive children. Yeah, that she has in her home, on top of her 3 natural children. And I just don't understand how that's okay. How foster parents can adopt the children that come into their home. Because it seems to be a way that they use children, or people can, or they have people foster in hopes to adopt children. And that is not, to me, that's a conflict of interest, a serious problem when you have someone who is going to possibly always, not looking at your child as reunification with the parents, but looking at them to stay in your home. That's an unfair disadvantage to many parents I see. And I've had that happen with people that I know, their children taken from them and adopted out from under them.
Now, can I ask you kind of a personal question here? Only
Sure.
because this kind of strikes home.
Sure.
Were you and your husband, were you guys like good partners? Were you guys like in love and like were you going to move forward in life with your family and everything? Or
Yeah. Up into that, up into that very moment, that was the plan.
right.
We had been married 12 years. I was pretty, you know, sitting it in my
Yeah.
ways. I believe. I'm sorry. I'm going to take a drink. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, because it's just this. It drives me insane because obviously, number one, you're going to do, and I'm sure he understood too. You got to do what you got to do for the kids. You know, like if they say, if
No,
you
he doesn't understand.
no,
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
I'll say this: I do understand, and like they try to do the same with my wife and I, and drive the stake in between us. Say
Right.
that there's things that there wasn't. Make her, tell her that hey, if you get rid of him, even though there was no anything between us at all whatsoever, but they were
Yeah.
trying to make these, they make these allegations, but they were trying to split up a perfectly good, healthy,
Oh no.
happy
Yeah.
family.
That's what they did. That, and matter of fact, actually, later on, my father-in-law, he was in the beginning stage of dementia. This is why we moved. We moved our family to go and care for him in his home, into this county that I've helped. Like I said, he was a public defender for this county for many, many years. And had his criminal law, his practice there. And I would help him, like I said, but we moved in to care for him, and they eventually ended up removing him as well, later on, and took a perfectly healthy man that enjoyed his grandchildren immensely, immensely. I mean, it was about his wife had passed away at 52 years.
Oh yeah.
So his grandchildren were as far as giving him another life to have after he was going to not be a criminal defense lawyer anymore. I mean, that was a big deal to him. He was an
Right.
A4 Skyhawk pilot. That was an even bigger deal. So like he needed to have something, that meant something for him to move on to, and he was. But they
Right.
did. They removed him, and 2 years later, he had passed away, which I believe fully that because what they did, removing him and with no warrant either, only using my husband had remained in the home as a reason to remove him. This anger issue that they kept insinuating that he had. There was no criminal charges on anything that he had ever done. So there wasn't. It was just that there was it was so silly. It was hearsay is really what it was, that this allegation was based off of, that someone misheard something and reported it while we were in the hospital having one of our children. And that's what that had this, because they tell you they're only going to keep your records or your case open for a year, or not open, but where they, where I guess they can see it, but
Right.
they don't. I saw on what this regional supervisor was looking at was everything I had ever had happen that DSS was involved in, which was a few other times, but everything ended up like unfounded. They actually founded this case of neglect, but I wasn't charged criminally. So I don't understand how I can actually abuse my children, neglect them, but I had to, my paid for lawyer had me tell me actually that I had to plead guilty to I guess it's that not neglect, but potential neglect or possible neglect, or I forget the terminology that they used for it, but risk of neglect. Oh, risk of neglect. That was it. That I had to plead guilty and say that I understand that no, I may not have abused them, but I potentially put them in a situation that was neglectful to them, which I still never understood what that was. But my lawyer said that that was so they could pay for all these tests and everything that they wanted me to do. But I had Medicaid, I had state insurance. So there was no reason, because they charged my state insurance while my children were gone for me to do these tests. So it was like, really? So now, and I didn't realize that that case was going to be founded. That just makes what they did to me okay on paper, right on paper, because every time I've ever gone to court or had anything to do where I've had an attorney involved, all I've ever heard was, well, it doesn't matter except what the court papers say. So all the stuff that happens in the courtroom doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the air of it. What matters what's written on the paper. And it just is so sad. It's so sad they can lie like that.
Is there anything that you can do, Mr. Davis, when they come in and they attack your family like this and they try to, kick dad out and separate mom and dad and they make these allegations or, and all of these I know you hear it more often than not, but what is there? Is there anything that you can do, or what's your line of your first strategy? When
Mr. Davis told me a strategy when that was told to me for my case.
What did I say?
Well, basically, they told me and my kids that the reason why they weren't coming home is because I chose not to leave my husband. And, that really wasn't the case because it was reunification for our whole family. And that's what we were told from the beginning. But when I told Mr. Davis this, he said, well, basically, you play the game, meaning, yes, it might be rough between you and your husband, but you know what? Your husband moves out or you move out. You have to play the game, though, all the way to really make it seem like you broke up, you separated, and, so many months go down and, you finally get your kids back. And then even some more months go down. And then, hey, husband then can come back home.
Perjury or fraud in court if you say that and speak.
No, meaning you exhaust like the whole time to basically show, like, for instance, what Tiffany did do. I would make it, and so would my husband make it, that's what we would be doing, like letting them think that we really broke up and that we're never going to get back together. And then, she gets her kids back, her case is closed. Guess what? A little bit more time goes on, and then who's to say that her husband and her can't reconcile and he move back in?
Oh, well, you know what they did. Well, you know what they did to make sure that I'm not quite too sure exactly why they did this, but since my husband, because we hadn't had a divorce, we actually divorced afterwards, after the children came back home. But they had it stated, since he hadn't finished his 42 weeks of criminal domestic violence classes, that in the court papers that I would receive full custody of the children and that he would not be able to be given custody temporarily or otherwise of the children without DSS being notified.
Okay. Did they say anything that, like, he couldn't move back in and be your husband?
I didn't really. I think at the time I was so flabbergasted by what I had to witness. And I was so appalled and angry. First of all, I was so angry that I gave almost 10 grand to a lawyer that wasn't doing anything. Like I said, he was going to be someone who was going to be a part of it anyway if I didn't hire a private attorney, but could not give me that information prior to hiring him for his help. I thought it was someone who, like, was by my father-in-law suggested to me, and everyone thought he was a pretty good attorney, but it seemed to be the bread and butter of this small little place in South Carolina, that I'm sure there's thousands of places just like this, that where one hand washes the other. I even filed a complaint on this regional supervisor for the way she was conducting herself to our state office in Columbia, and had the regional supervisor that the complaint was about call me about the complaint that I filed on her. So I couldn't do anything. So at that time, at the very end, I didn't ask. I figured, well, if we can make it through this, and I feel like these People aren't going to just come pop back. I moved back home. I left that county pretty much immediately after receiving my children, homeschool my children to this day. I homeschool them. They will not go to school. No. Public school, no. I will homeschool my children. I will be the mandatory reporter. I will never, ever have that happen to me or them again. But, I just didn't want to push the envelope with these people because it was like, well, if I watched you do what you've done so far, even be in the courtroom and deny they had paperwork I knew they had, that I knew I faxed them. I knew they had it because I made them confirm that they have it. And then we go to court and it gets continued because they say I didn't turn in a piece of paper. It was just unbelievable.
Tiffany, time out.
Yes, sir.
Time out. Getting back to Mr. Guai's question.
Sorry.
Right. So, Darren, one of the things about strategy in these cases is that, if you're not used to doing these cases, you would consider these strategies very subtle. In other words, from the question you ask me, I'm going to tell you what was wrong with the question, because the strategy is different depending on what module you're in. And the strategies are different depending on what happened at your jurisdictional and dispositional hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, the strategy I gave Deidre was a strategy for her in her case at a particular point in time. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want you guys to think that's the strategy from the beginning of the CPS timeline to the end. Okay? Because that's not the strategy. It can become a strategy because of what happens at other hearings and what findings and orders a judge may make. At every hearing, the judge makes findings and orders. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to adjust your strategy after each hearing going forward. Now, the reason why a lot of people don't want to do that or are reluctant to do that, because they don't agree with what the judge found or ordered. But what a lot of people don't understand, that unless you make a motion for some type of reconsideration or you make an appeal and you win, those orders are the orders. They're like the 10 Commandments etched in stone on your case. That's the law of your case. And whether you like it or not, if you want to get the kids back, you have to come up with a strategy for those particular orders and findings. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely makes sense.
So, you could go through the detention hearing, the jurisdictional hearing, and the dispositional hearing. And if you lose and the judge orders you to do services A, B, C, the highest probability of success is for you to do A, B, C. One of the problems that comes up is, like in Deidre's case, they just take it among themselves to tell you, we're not going to give you the kid back unless you leave the father. The problem is that at that hearing, at the jurisdictional dispositional hearing, the judge probably made orders for the father to do certain things to get the kids back. But then you have a social worker that's saying, I don't care if he does those things. I'm never going to give you back the kids unless you leave them. That's wrong. And
that's exactly my situation.
And that's what you and your attorney have to bring up immediately to the judge. And it's always good if the social worker tells you that in writing, email, text, or, at your home with your Ring camera on. Because if that's not the case, I can assure you, if you bring that to the judge's attention, the social worker is going to say, I never said that. She must have misunderstood me. Okay. But you still should bring it to the judge, because then the judge can say, well, look, this is family reunification, right? No matter what the dad did, I ordered, if the judge did order, I ordered family reunification services for Mr. Dad. And if Mr. Dad does them, he gets his kids back, right? And if Miss Mom, Deidre, does her family unification services, they both get the kids back if they're together. So there's a lot of social engineering going on behind the scenes that I don't think the judges are ever aware of. And I can tell you, it was until recently that I even understood the breadth and depth of manipulation of parties, of children, of foster parents, of parents that happens outside of the courtroom. And it's never reported to, the judge. So I'll give you an example that just happened to me on a case several months ago. The child was anticipated to testify ABC. Child's like 6 or 7 years old in a foster home. It's alleged that the social worker went to the foster parent and told the foster parent to convince the child to say something totally different. Now, if you're a 6-year-old kid or 7-year-old kid, you can be easily manipulated. Let's face it. All right. And with constant reinforcement of maybe withholding toys or snacks or food, you can convince anybody of anything. You guys may not be old enough, but I don't know if you guys know the name Patricia Hertz.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Patty Hertz.
Yep.
She's a child or a grandchild in a multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar family. Okay, the Hearst media empire. She was kidnapped by the SLA, a faction, a very violent faction of the then, I think, Black Panther Party, a spinoff, so to speak. Well, through something called Stockholm Syndrome, they brainwashed her. The next time you see her, she's got a shotgun or a machine gun or something helping to rob a bank. Now you scratch your head and you say, well, how'd that happen? Well, human beings can be manipulated and brainwashed, okay, with certain types of things. Deprivation is one of those things. How do you know if your kid's being deprived of something and convinced to say some things that are half truths or not truths? Those are things that don't show up in the reports to the court. And if the kid ever comes to court, kid testifies, no, mommy did it. And the judge not knowing this, the judge is going to say, oh, okay, I believe the kid. But it was manipulated by, in this particular case, allegedly, by the social worker and foster parent. Sometimes there is a union, an unholy union between foster parents and children's social workers.
Yes.
And Tiffany kind of talked about it, but I don't think she knew the extent of what she was saying. You see, foster parents are in the business of being foster parents. Who do they get their money from? The county. Who gives them the business? The social worker. So if the social worker is giving you business of thousands of dollars a month, are you going to do what the social worker wants? Now, sometimes it's very subtle. It might be something like the social worker telling the foster parent, we're not sure about ABC, but, if the kid did say that, we can really protect the kid. It's like one of those things like by any means necessary. We're going to protect kids by any means necessary. And if we have to kind of bend the rules, bend justice, we're going to do that because we feel that children's rights and children's safety is paramount above everything else.
Right. Like they tend to leave out the fact that the baby cries every night for their mother, but they won't say that in these hearings. The foster parents will say, no, I don't hear anything like that. Like they'll leave those things out, even though, earlier in the day, the foster parent was like,
I have a question about something similar to that, Mr. Davis.
You have what?
I have a question. I have a question like in a similar aspect of that, meaning, for instance, I have 3 boys. My 2 older boys were with my mom, and she chose to do legal guardianship. So technically I didn't lose my rights. But my youngest, which basically was given to these foster parents when he was basically born, and then my case is now 2 years in, and they, of course, have always wanted to adopt, meaning because they wanted to adopt, it's like, okay, well, now I lose my rights to him and they get to adopt him. Why couldn't they basically force the foster parents to do legal guardianship as well in that aspect?
There's no money in legal guardianship.
Right. That's right.
But you know what? Because here's something I want you to think about.
Okay.
When you went to court, were all 3 of your children represented by the same attorney?
No.
There were 2 different attorneys? Okay.
The youngest had his own attorney, and my 2 older had their own attorney.
Was that from?
And I never understood that neither.
But I'll tell you why. Do you know why that was? That like that from the day one?
Well, when my case first started, I was 7 months pregnant, so my youngest wasn't born yet. That's what my understanding might have been why he had his own attorney. I don't know.
Okay. The reason why is because at some point in time, the baby's attorney is going to recommend adoption, which means not only do you lose your rights, but the 2 older kids lose their rights. They lose a sibling.
Well, yeah, that's what happened. So
there's a conflict. One attorney can't be recommending adoption for the baby and not for the 2 older boys because his clients, the 2 older boys, are losing a sibling. So he or she can't do that. It's a conflict. But, I've seen it happen before where the same attorney represents all 3 kids. And if the
thing that really bothered me was at my TPR hearing, the attorney for my youngest said on record that the parents have shown a great deal of, progress and everything positive and, going forward. But the only thing is we're just kind of at that time clock where we're out of time. Now, if we just had 1 more year, I could definitely see child returning back home to parents. But unfortunately, we are just out of time. That sticks to me like almost every day of my life, thinking she even said if we just could have a little bit more time, she could see my kid coming home, but we're out of time.
But Deidre, that's not even the legal standard. That's not even an issue. The only issue at the TPR hearing is whether you have a relationship with the child, or, the child has a relationship to you that would be detrimental.
Well, that's what they used against me. They said the bond that they would break between my child and now the foster parents, because that's all he's lived with since he's been born, meaning, paternal grandmother wanted to have placements since day one. That's another story. But, that's what they used against me. It would be more detrimental to break the bond between my child and these foster parents to have him come home than it would be to terminate my rights and lose my child for the rest of his life and be with these foster parents.
Yeah, that's not even the standard. That's not accurate. What the test is that does the child have a relationship with you such that if parental rights were terminated, it would be detrimental to the child. Okay, so you have to show that close relationship. And by the way, to show that close relationship, as explained in the case laws in California, it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult to even meet that standard. Now, the unfortunate part of all of this is the grandparents, the siblings, they all lose a relationship with that child. And arguably, they had nothing to do with it being in, CPS court. But they went to court and they lost a brother. How'd that happen?
And I lost a child that wasn't even born when my case opened.
Exactly. Right. There wasn't a part of your case. It wasn't a part of anything.
Meaning it didn't even exist technically when this case opened, meaning I think the only reason why they kept my case going so long is because they had the eye on the prize. They
Right, the
wanted my
baby.
youngest.
That's
I mean,
right.
they just, my perfectly healthy, beautiful,
$26,000.
and these foster parents, they couldn't have children of their own. This was their first placement, so their first rodeo. And of course, they had my
Fell in
child
love.
handed to them at 1 month old, and 2 years later, they don't want to give him back.
Right.
Yeah, that's awful. It's just awful. It's heartbreaking. I'm so sorry.
I think 50 years from now we'll look back at what we were doing to families and children, and we'll say, we weren't
This
that.
is definitely a big mistake.
Yeah, we
It's
made
it's child trafficking what the entire court system is doing.
Basically, you're right. You're right. That's what
And
it
who's
is.
going to suffer the most is the actual child, meaning
Right.
he's not going to grow up in a strange family. He's half black, half white, but his foster parents now are white. I mean, white, Mormon, blonde haired, blue eyes. I mean, just that in itself, him growing up and having to face all those issues.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
If you really want to talk about, look at what they're doing with the Native American tribes when they're promoting, they're essentially genociding them by allowing them to go outside of the tribes, and then just it's fine, don't interfere, don't nothing. And then now once they have a child outside of that tribe, they're weakening that tribe. There's no tribe left. Like they're just eliminating,
picking them off and sending them out of their exactly.
Real quick, Mr. Davis, I know you answered my question, which is kind of obvious, but backing up, and you said the answer to why is it okay for me basically to still have my rights and have my mom be the legal guardian, but because they want to adopt, okay, yeah, you lose your rights and now they get to adopt, and you said because of funding, but like when it boils down to it, I mean, I don't know how else to ask my question other than that's okay. I mean, because really,
you know why it's okay? Because the law says it's okay.
Yeah.
Now, in your heart of hearts and as a human being, it's not okay. It's terrible.
Well, yeah.
Right?
But justice isn't what it is in the court.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's
terrible.
Not. It
it's
truly
what
isn't.
Tiffany said. It's child trafficking. But
yeah.
But we've made a certain exception in the law to allow social workers to do this. Mm-hmm. It's written in the law. Now, I've always said, look, if you want to make some changes, change the law.
Yeah.
How do you change the law? You vote in your people. Okay.
But how is there no money in legal guardian? Because my mom still gets paid every month the same amount of money now that she's their legal guardian, as she did throughout the whole case.
To be honest.
Will that end one day?
When they're 18.
Yeah.
When they're 18.
But yeah, so how is there no money in that if she still will get money every month?
There's upfront bonuses for adoption.
Absolutely. They get $26,000 a child that they adopt.
So it's just more money for the adoption than it is legal guardian.
Yeah.
For the social worker and the adoptive parents get to pay a reduction, a reduced price. Say if they would have went through full adoption with an agency, they get like a discount. Let's say.
Yeah. Hold on a second. I'm going to mute Tiffany for a minute. Okay. Look, Tiffany, hold on a second. Relax.
You got it.
All right. Deidre.
Yes.
When you go to McDonald's, would Ronald McDonald want you to buy a Big Mac or a hamburger?
A Big Mac.
Right. Why? Because he makes more money. Does he want you to supersize your fries? Why? Make more money. Does he want to supersize that drink? Why? Make more money. Does he want to sell you an ice cream cone and a hot apple pie? I don't know if they still have those. Why? They make more money. So,
but I think my question is like what you said before. If you're good enough to be a parent to have one child return, why can't you have all of your children? So if I'm good enough to not have my rights terminated for my two older, why am I not still good enough to not have them terminated for my younger? I get it, supersize, more money, but
you're trying to use common sense.
Again, yes, and that's not.
How many times have you heard me say common sense doesn't apply to the law?
Yep.
Okay. So if you're looking for fairness and common sense,
no,
you'll be frustrated, I guess, for the rest of your life. Because the law's not about that.
Yeah.
You probably, I should probably become an Amazon affiliate. I try to recommend this book to everyone. It's called The Economic Analysis of the Law.
This is a law. Yep.
You read that, you'll understand how money affects everything in the law. Right? And
Last question about this, and I'll drop it. What if the foster parents were willing to be the legal guardian? Would I possibly have still kept my rights and they could have been the legal guardian? It was all because they wanted to adopt, is why it went that way?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. So ultimately, it lied in the foster parents' decision in a way.
Basically, yes. The foster parent and the
Wow.
social worker.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes it even more kind of disgusting in a way. I mean, how much more could they tell me to my face that they want to steal my child and not give them back?
Yeah. And the child not being placed with the grandparent or another relative or family friend, that's a whole nother discussion of why that doesn't happen.
Especially without accounting, I believe, and you say the funding follows the child.
Well, here's something I want to tell you. When your child was taken away from you at birth or 1 month after birth, there was a plan, a long-term plan that was made for your child. Okay. They call it concurrent planning. It's in the law. Okay. It's in the law. So your baby was put on the adoption train. All right. And for you to stop that train, you and your lawyer would have to pull off probably a little miracle. Now, I don't know what, the allegations were and what you did or didn't do, but that train is going down the track. It's like a snowball. And as time goes on, it's gaining more and more speed. I think I told you this before, but I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. In 1989, I was doing juvenile dependency cases. And it used to be that if you didn't get your kids back, they generally went into something called long-term foster care or legal guardianship. Very rarely were they ever adopted. And as a matter of fact, in the old days, there was nothing called 366.26. There was something called a Civil Code 232 action. They actually had to bring another case and prove that your rights should be terminated, which, it was a lot of work to do for the county. But at a certain point, Clinton became president and he tried to solve a problem, a budgetary problem. And the budgetary problem was, we don't want to pay grandma for the next 18 years for that baby to be placed in her home for long-term foster care or legal guardianship. Because if grandma adopts the kid, and they don't really tell grandma this, or they sometimes actually lie to grandma. Grandma, if you adopt the kid, you'll get money until she's 18 or the child's 18. That's a lie. As a matter of fact, it usually can end after 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So that's how that budgetary problem was fixed. Hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars was saved by making grandma adopt the kid and then cutting her off after a couple years. That's why we have termination proceedings, and that's why the law tells us it's favored. Now, we fool ourselves and tell ourselves in the courtroom, oh, the kid should be adopted. That's the best interest of the child. No, it's not. Who thought of the brilliant idea to make grandmother the mother and to make the mother the sister?
Mm-hmm.
What brilliant idea was that? So it all has to do with funding. We say it's best interest of the child. Why do we say that? Oh, they told us that it was best interest of the child. Let's adopt because that's best for the child. No, it's not. That wasn't based on any study.
Now, there's not one thing that says that any of this is good for a child.
Right. It's not. It was all to save money.
Mhm.
And when they came up with 366.26, the easy termination so that somebody could adopt your kid, that was challenged as being unconstitutional. But every state found that it was constitutional. Why? Because everybody was in on the idea of it being best for children and saving the government millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you're saving the government millions, it has to be good, right? It has to be good.
And little Susie Q gets a home now, and she's perfect. Look at we helped out. We helped out, everybody. We helped.
And get this, the foster parents or adoptive parents now, whatever you want to call them, told me recently, because I think I've seen my son maybe 3 times now since last July for 30 minutes each. This last one being about a week ago, which was the worst of it yet, because he just cried the whole time, because I think it was just that point where where the foster parents trying to have him be, enough time lapse. But anyways, I asked him flat out, I said, so has the adoption gone through yet? And he said, no. And I said, oh, do you know when it's going to? He says, no one tells us anything. You know how that goes. We never find out anything. And I said, oh, okay, well, are you going to change his name when you adopt him on his birth certificate? And he said, no, we're going to keep his first name. And I said, well, what about his last name? Oh, yes, we're changing his last name. And that just, wow. Now, will he get a new social when they change his name? Or will his social security be the same?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Why would I mean, I don't know. Apparently they're still trying to play the game that they want to keep like a somewhat open adoption, meaning to let him still know. Like I'm now considered bio mom. So like if we were to have a visit again in the future, or like we did just recently, I have to refer myself as bio mom because they are referred as mama and daddy, which is just disgusting to me. But they told me that
when he's about 8 to 13, and he starts having problems because he realizes these people, or he's been told that these people aren't his parents, he's going to start wondering, like, what the hell's going on here? Everybody at school has their parents, their real parents, right?
Yeah, really.
Now, there's something I want to say, okay, to be fair to the whole situation. Are there ever any cases where the termination of rights and the adoption of children work out? Yes, there are. Okay. In my opinion, in my experience, though, the majority of those situations don't work out. There's always something in our hearts and in our minds that if we lose a parent for whatever reason, and we know that, we're going to be affected by that. Period. End of story.
Well, like Tiffany even said in the beginning, like foster parents, from what I understand, is when they're fostering children, especially in a situation where it's supposed to be reunification, that's what they're supposed to be like emphasizing and supporting, not in, I feel like my case where it's nothing but the opposite. And
they can't be supporting you in reunification services if their ultimate goal is to adopt your child.
Exactly.
But you know why they allow that? Because the law allows them to.
Is it weird that the foster parents throughout my whole case had their own social worker from their foster agency? Is that weird or no?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
No. Hey, folks, we've come to the end of the show. We're way over. Tiffany, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Payne,
Got your kids back. We don't hear that very often.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I really was. I really was.
Mr. Payne, Mr. Guai.
Mr. Payne.
Mr. Guai, thank you.
Yes.
And we'll see everyone. Is today Friday? Yeah, today's Friday.
Yeah.
We'll see everyone tomorrow.
Damn.
Yeah, Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Our show will be on Saturday and Sundays at 9 a.m. So we'll see everybody then. Good night, all.
Mm.
Good night.